Hi folks, Kevin here. Well, although that may not look like with the background back here, bumblebees started up back here. I'm up front with some pallets of pavers. It may not look like this is day 2 of that composting video, but it actually is. I fired up Bumblebee because I went up and I checked the temperatures in the compost pile. Today's Wednesday, August 9th, 2017, and this is the weed composting video update. So what the heck's going on? Then you see the tractor there with forks mounted on the front of it, and that's why I'm using Bumblebee. But I just went out back, grabbed the grading bucket so that I can work that compost pile, because I don't want to take the forks off that. It's a big endeavor putting these forks on here so that I can try and get these pallets moved. I got to reload new pallets and move those. But that isn't what this video is about. Let's go check on the compost pile. Okay, so I'm up here at the compost pile, the weed composting pile, and this is the second video in the series. And 2 days ago when I turned this pile, I mentioned that sometimes I've got to turn the pile every day. Now that's often when I don't have the chance to really keep a close eye on it, when I get the fear of it going over 165, such as when I'm putting on a roof or bringing up the walls and stabilizing things in different construction projects on site. However, I neglected to say how important it is, not only moisture and temperature. We want the temperature between 145 and 165. Once we hit 165, it's time to turn the pile because we're going anaerobic. So I've been watching the temperatures very closely, and we've been very close up until right now. I checked the temperature in the piles a few minutes ago, and that's why I decided, okay, I already have the forks loaded on on my tractor, on the loader. It takes me a while to get that done. Last night, before I turned in, I secured those forks on there, thinking I'd probably have maybe another half a day before I'd have to turn this. This morning I checked the temperatures, and I see what we've got. So I'm going to turn the camera around. Okay, here's one of the temperature probes here. These are 3-footers. So I'm not getting to the center of the pile when I'm here, and this is angled down somewhat. So I'm just going to move it for a minute and we'll turn it up a little bit higher. Well, we've got a higher temperature there. We'll see where that stops in a minute. I'm going to go around to the other side. And we're there. We're at the 165. So the point I wanted to make, that I never finished my thought process, it's not just important to maintain adequate moisture content in the pile, to stay within the temperature ranges. We want it above 145 and we want it below 165. And you can see this pile's hit 165. But it's been at 160 for about 2 days. If I can stay below 165 and I can go 3 days, the idea of pathogens, the possibility of pathogens or weed seeds being able to germinate within the center of the pile where the temperature is actually that high is almost completely nil. There's almost no chance. So it's not only achieving optimal temperature, it's maintaining optimal temperature for, let's say, 3 days. I'm not sure what the maximum period is. If I could go potentially 3.5, 4 days and stay below 165, I typically don't reach for the 4 days, and the reason is I'm afraid of it going anaerobic with these larger piles that I make. Now this is one of my smallest piles, so I will at times. When I'm doing one of those big piles, no, I don't go for, once I'm at 160, I'm going to turn it because I can't get that temperature probe. These are just 36 inches or 3 feet or just under a meter. I can't be certain that just a little bit further in the temperature isn't even higher. Let's take a look at that other probe again. All right, so we're about 149, 148 on this spot right here. So that's another key element that I neglected to mention on the first video. It's really important to try to get to the center of the pile. It's really important to move your temperature probes around, your thermometers around, so that you can actually get an accurate idea of what the temperature actually are achieving in there. So moving those probes around is very, very important because you may have hot spots in different locations in the pile. So that's one thing. So moisture, temperature, being within the ideal temperature range, staying within that temperature range for, let's say, 3 days or potentially longer, and moving your temperature probes around and reassessing moisture content. Those are all very important points. Now I've got to go ahead and turn the pile with the grater bucket and bumblebee, and typically you want to strip the outside of the pile, go around the perimeter of the pile and get that into the center of the pile. But more importantly, we want to make sure that we're mixing it up very well so that the oxygen content gets increased. This one is much shorter than it was 2 days ago, and the reason is because of all that hay and weed material that's been compressing down as a result of all of that biological activity and things just being consumed like crazy. And the air spaces have been reduced in size, so it's eating up the oxygen in there. So I want to fluff the pile up, if you will, get as much on the from the outside on the inside of the pile, and get the inside of the pile on the outside. I'm not as concerned about that today because I really want those weed roots to achieve that high temperature for a longer period of time. So let's turn the pile. Okay, we were successful. We were able to use Bumblebee to go ahead and repile the weedy compost pile. I've got the thermometers back in the pile at this point. Couple of things. The front end loader does a much quicker job of moving things around. And when I initially create the first pile, I'm taking whatever I have at the time. So if I'm going and getting loads of manure, and it happens to have dirt in it or rocks in it, that's what I have, and I'm usually going back and forth and getting several loads at a time. I dump the trailer, I push it up into a pile, and that's it. Now, I only had a couple loads worth in this pile, but then I was gathering up all the weeds. So I'd load them in the front end tractor, I'd try to pack them up, put them up on the top of it or on the side of it, but ideally we want to try and mix everything up. When we're creating a compost pile, if you've got leaves, if you've got hay or straw, you got manure, you've got weeds, it would be great if you were to take a fraction of each one of those components and layer it. That would be the ideal situation. It just isn't a practical thing with the way that I have to do things here on site. If I get the opportunity to get the weeding, I may have several yards of weeds that all go in one pile. You pay the price when you go to repile the pile, because as you could see, sometimes it was hard for me to get a hold of a good scoop because the weeds were all congealed and grouped together in a big bulky mess. And my goal is to try and break up all the clumps. So if I get a whole bunch of hay in a couple of scoops, I want to spread it out a little bit. If I get a whole bunch of weeds and I can't get it up, then I use the excavator to push back and break up the piles and then grab it again. So that's the reason for some of the things that I was doing. I also want to pick it up as high as possible and drop it to increase the air flow through the whole pile to make sure that we stay anaerobic decomposition, because this thermophilic type of composting, oxygen is critical to maintain an aerobic composting pile. So that's it for today, folks. I'll be keeping a close eye on the temperatures. Now back to moving the pavers. Take care and have a fantastic day. Bye-bye now.